how do we fight apathy and gaslighting? Well, if you are up against apathy, first of all, you have to start believing in yourself and believing that you can make a difference. But then once you start believing in yourself, somebody is going to want to put you down, especially when it comes to Palestine. So you have to be ready for this kind of opposition. So if you come against, for instance, a narcissist who is trying to gaslight you, don't turn around and fight that. Instead, remember what you believe. Remember that we are taught to love our neighbors as ourselves. We are taught to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, and strength.
Welcome to Learning to Listen to Palestine, where stories come alive and hearts connect. Each week, your host, Lanny Lanchester, will dive into the untold histories, powerful narratives, and insightful interviews that bring us closer to understanding Palestine. Ready to be educated, empowered, and motivated? Let's get started.
All right, welcome everybody to Learning to Listen to Palestine. And my name is Lanny Lanchester. I'm your host, and I am taking you on my journey as I learn to listen to Palestine. So this week, we're going to explore apathy and what is apathy and what does it look like and what is its effect on the world, and specifically on Palestine, but not just Palestine, on the world, because apathy it's corrosive. And so we're going to look at what that looks like and what it does to the world. We're also going to look at gaslighting today. And what is gaslighting? What does gaslighting look like? We've all heard this term, but do we really know what it is? And if we saw it, would we recognize it? Now, if you learn what gaslighting is, and if you learn to recognize it, you'll be surprised how often you see that you're being gaslighted, somebody else is being gaslighted, and what is happening in the media and when this is gaslighting. So you want to be aware of what gaslighting is so you can call it out and say, no, that's not okay. And so we'll talk about the history of what gaslighting is. And we're going to talk about justice and what are some things that we can do once we've overcome apathy and we've overcome gaslighting. Then we can prepare ourselves to have our own voice, to speak for others who do not have a voice, because we are here in America, we're very privileged to have a voice that we can speak for others. And so that's what we're going to be working on today in Learning to Listen to Palestine. So to start, I'm going to share an excerpt from my book. So I wrote this book, Learning to Listen to Palestine, A Personal Quest, because this is my personal quest. I have been learning how to listen, because listening doesn't come naturally. It's something that you have to work on and learn to do. And here's an example of me learning to listen. And this is called A Lesson in Humanity. And it starts at a grocery store. Standing in line in the grocery store, an old homeless man was dumping out change and crumpled dirty bills on the counter. Next to the dirty money was a new, clean blanket from the discount rack in the back of the store. His white-gray hair was matted, and his beard was scraggly and stained. He wore a heavy army jacket, but last night had been cold, and this night would be colder. Long, filthy nails pushed money around the counter. He was frustratingly slow, trying to count money to buy the blanket. Two clerks rolled their eyes at each other, exasperated, and just wanted him to get back outside so they could clean the counter. I heard God speak to me. Pay for the blanket. Feeling shy, I reached for my wallet, but hesitated for just a moment. At that moment, another clerk tapped me on the shoulder and took my basket and said, "Follow me." I did. I rushed through my checkout, being polite, and I thought, I will find the man and see how I can help him. But he was gone. I followed the man instead of God. I followed man instead of God. In that moment, a man was dehumanized, treated like refuse to be cleaned up. Was his need met? Maybe he got the blanket, but either way, he would be sleeping on the street, and who would know his name? Who would offer him kindness or mercy? The lesson was a quick moment in my life that has replayed over and over in my mind. So many things I learned about myself, about my people, about my relationship with God. I find it so automatic, so easy to follow humans who politely say, "Follow me." They will accept me and tell me that I have followed the right path. I have allowed them the space to clean up a mess. I have not interjected my hand into a situation that was none of my business. In fact, I partnered in my passive way with dehumanizing a man whom God created and loved. I hesitated to follow God, questioning my mind, my resources, and the abilities that God had given me to obey Him. I often say in hard things, I trust God. In the little subtle things, I need to learn to hear God's voice and obey Him quickly. The hesitation, the moment of doubt, gave room for a temptation to present itself. I chose to follow the man. I am trained in politeness and in passivity to follow human direction instead of God. But God is radical. He will make me into a radical. He would have me jump in and change the life of a man. He would have me see him as a human. He would have me know that God sees and loves him. He would have me see that this man is of immeasurable worth. He would have me love him. I also learned from the clerks. They did not see a man. They saw a problem. They saw filth, refuse, inconvenience, frustration, embarrassment, but not a human. It was the Holy Spirit that helped me recognize this mess before me as a man whom God loved. It was the Holy Spirit who helped me to relate my own soul stuck in a pit to this man stuck on the street. Over the next year, the Holy Spirit would bring back this moment and teach me about dehumanization. So that's a picture of me learning about my apathy. Perhaps I tried, but I didn't try very hard. And I could see the apathy of the others around. And the truth is, I didn't see the human before me. I didn't see the person that God loved. But God did, and He tried to give me a nudge and wake me up. And maybe He let me fail just so it would be something that has nagged at me for several years. So that's one picture of apathy. But what does apathy look like when it comes to Palestine? I have a book here. This is by Munter Isaac. He is a Palestinian Christian from Bethlehem. He is the pastor of the Church of the Nativity. Can you imagine? Over the place where Christ was born. Well, here's a story about him dealing with apathy of Christians towards Palestine. And so I want you to hear this story of how Munter Isaac faced apathy of the church. Many Christians today believe that there is a special affinity between Christians and Jews. They remind us that Jesus came to the Jew first. I was once speaking to a group of Christian leaders in the Netherlands whose church believed that Christians have an unbreakable bond with the Jewish people. I asked them, "What kind of bond do you have with me as a fellow human being, let alone a brother in Christ who is not Jewish? Is it a breakable bond?" They were noticeably silent and confused. I followed, "How does this statement shape your views on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict?" I then posed my question in another form. If you encounter two people in need of help, a Palestinian and a Jew, who would you help first and why? Again, they were visibly silent. So that silence, that sign of apathy. Finally, I made a plea to them. For us Palestinians, what we ask for is that your church Palis- view us both, Palestinians and Israelis, as though through the same lens, as equals. I expressed to them that I could not accept their viewing the Jewish people through theological lens and the Palestinians through one of charity. We do not want your sympathy, charity, or even money, I told them. We want to be viewed and treated equally. More silence followed. I have participated in an annual Christian-Jewish dialogue week for several years now that brings together Palestinian Christians from our Lutheran Church and other Christian communities with Israeli and international Jews. During these meetings, it has come apparent that many of our German friends are simply not able to move outside the paradigm in which they view the Jewish participants as the children of Abraham and Jacob, and the Palestinians as the children of Ishmael and Esau. This has shaped how they perceive the individually and collectively, and to a certain degree, how they perceive the future of this land. At one point, I became upset and said, drawing on Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous I Have a Dream speech, I too have a dream that one day Western Christians would stop looking at Palestinians and Jews based on our perceived ancestors and what they believe the Bible said about our ancestors, that they would judge us based on the content of our character. The Jewish participants nodded in approval. And so there's a picture of the apathy in the church as a Palestinian is going to face the church and ask them for equal treatment. Very simply, equal treatment. The reason why I bring all of this up is I have been facing some oppression, some oppressive, as I've been trying to publish this book, Learning to Listen to Palestine. I wrote a book with Palestine on the front of it. And it's a very difficult book to get out. And I know all about this because years ago, about 5 years ago, I had a friend who wrote a book about Palestine, and I was unable to read it. Why? Why would I be unable to read it? It wasn't because I couldn't afford it. It wasn't because I couldn't access it. It was because I just couldn't get past Palestine on the cover. So I have the book now in PDF form. So here's the book. And it's called Edward Said on the Prospect of Peace in Palestine and Israel. Now, why would I have a problem with somebody looking to make peace in Israel and Palestine? Isn't that interesting? It was because for some reason I had this apathy that clouded my eyes so much that I couldn't get past the word Palestine on the cover of a book. Now, you guys are already doing better than I did because you've made it to this podcast that has Palestine in the name. So I'm so glad that you're here and that you are encountering and exploring this idea with me. So I want to keep on exploring this a little bit more and tell you the story of what has been going on as I've been trying to support and promote this book. Many people have received it very well. My mom has been an amazing supporter in this book and sharing this book. She raised me a Christian Zionist. But as I learned to listen, she learned right along with me. And when I started writing this book, she was my greatest supporter. So happy that I was finally writing this book of all these things I'd been learning about. And she has been an editor. She has been a helper. She has been just an incredible encouragement in the book. But not everybody has been that way. I mean, this is my mom. In my church, I really hope to get encouragement in my church, and many people did. I had all my first readers of my book, besides my mom, were all from my church, and they would be friends. They'd be people that I would talk to between services, and I was carrying around this manuscript in my arms for weeks because I carried around this new manuscript that I was working on like a baby. And anybody who would read it, I shared it with them and I said, I'd love your feedback. I want to know what you think and what your feelings are. And I got such incredible support and kindness from so many people who were very interested in my stories and where I went in Israel and Palestine, what I learned, the stories that people told me. I also went to Jordan and I told the stories about that, and they were very excited about it. However, there are a lot of pastors in my church, and I gave copies of it or PDFs of it to all the pastors in my church. And I would get messages like, "Oh, I'm going to read it. I'll read it. I'm really, really busy, but I'll read it next week. Oh, I'm going to be on a plane. I'll be able to read it when I'm on the plane. Next week, I have some time, and you know what? I'm going to read that book." And over, I would hear this, and I was patient. I really did want the feedback from my pastors because if I had something wrong in my theology, because there's a lot of theology in this book, I wanted to know if I had it right or if I had it wrong. If I got some facts wrong, I wanted somebody to fact check me, or if it came across as rude, or I just really wanted a lot of readers to help me, to honestly give me feedback in the book. But it just didn't happen. So I was impatient and frustrated about it. But the great thing was, I had two pastors from Palestine read it for me and fact check it. I had a friend in Palestine read it for me and fact check it. And then I had a friend from France read it and fact check it. And then there was a pastor from Biola College who read it and fact checked it for me as well and gave me some great feedback and great help with it. So I did get the help I needed. And so I was able to move forward and with confidence in getting the book published. After the book was published, I'm very excited about, okay, the book is published now. So I am ready to not only share the book with people, the real book, the published book with people, but I wanted to do some things to help people learn more about Palestine. So I found about this great thing, this great conference called Christ at the Checkpoint in Bethlehem. And I had an opportunity to go. I could, after I got out of school, because I teach, at the end of the school year, it was just the right timing that I could go to Bethlehem and spend a week there learning with other Christians and from around the world who came together to meet with the Palestinians there to learn about what they're going through. How can we support them? Really checking our theology, answering our questions about the theology that confuses us, and asking the questions about what they're really going through to make sure we really understand what they're going through. I had this opportunity to learn all of this, so I was very excited. But I had this idea. I just wish that I could share it with somebody in my church. And so I talked to a few people, and it seemed like I had some support to bring the conference to my church instead. It could be brought in remotely. And so I pivoted. Instead of going to Bethlehem, I decided I'm going to try to bring this conference to my church, and it looked like I was going to be able to do it. However, once I got through the pastors called me into the office and they said no. And they had some reasons that I thought sounded weak. One of the reasons was they were just busy. They had a lot of things going on. Well, you know, the story of the Good Samaritan. You have the priest and the Levite who walk right on past the injured man on the side of the road. Maybe they were just busy. Maybe they had some really important church business to do, you know? And maybe that's why they didn't help the man at the side of the road. Maybe they didn't know if he's safe. I don't know. Don't know why. We don't know why, but maybe it was really important church business. And that was my thought, is maybe we should rethink this. Make sure that, because I was willing to do all the work. Just give me a space. I'll promote it. I'll let people know if people want to come. I know that there's a few who would want to come at least, because I'd talked to a few people about it, but they weren't interested. Anyway, so I was unable to bring it in the end, and it was a great disappointment to me. But I was looking at other ways. And I talked to the pastors. They gave me some reasons that sounded fairly reasonable, but I'm still very excited about my book. I'm really excited about supporting Palestine. I'd been watching horrible things going on for a year and felt paralyzed, and I was ready to move to action. And rather than just working on my own notebook on my own computer, I was ready to connect with other people, and this was getting lonelier and lonelier as I was at this point. So I then found out there's this movie, and if you haven't seen it, you should watch it. It's called Where the Olive Trees Weep, and it was available for screening at churches and for free. And so this brand new movie, it sounded so similar to the way I wrote my book. I went to Israel thinking I was going on a pilgrimage. I thought I was going for one reason. But once I was there and started meeting people, I and started listening to people, I found that I was there for a completely different realized reason than I realized. The film crew who made Where the Olive Trees Weep, they said something similar. They said that they thought they were going to Palestine to film something. They had heard about the torture and atrocities, the oppression happening to the Palestinians. They thought they didn't really think much of it. They thought maybe it was an exaggeration. They didn't know if it was real. But when they got there and they witnessed it and they talked to people, they realized that it was real and their story became something completely different than they planned to film. And when they got done, they really just wanted to get it out there for free. And so they were looking for people to host it. And so I applied and they accepted me. And I just needed to find a place to host it. So I went to my church again and I asked if I could host this. And this did not make them happy. My pastors called me into the office again and they sat me down between two pastors and they weren't happy. And during this time, I asked them, have either of you even read my book yet? Would you please read my book? You sat me down for 2 hours last time I was in your office, and now I'm here in your office for another 2 hours as I'm being talked to about this. And during that time, you could have read the book. It's not that long of a book. I mean, you could do that and at least get a good ways through it. And so finally, I got a commitment that my pastor would read the book in the next month. So that was kind of the apathy affecting the church, that they were doing good things. They had a week of prayer during one of these times where they had constant prayer for a week. But what is prayer without action? I wanted to see some action, for people of this world, to make the world a better place, to serve Christ with our, not just on our knees, but with our hands and feet and walking and talking and with our voices. And this should have been a good sign. This is something that I had been trying to show my pastors for the previous year. This is another document that's really interesting. This is called Kairos Palestine, and this was written in 2009. And this is a really interesting document because it was written to the Western Church by the church from Palestine and Israel. So all of the church leaders, all the denominations, this is the Catholics, the Greek Orthodox, the Protestants, all of them, all of the old denominations, the Armenians, they all got together and they said, okay, what do we believe? Let's form some unity here. What do we believe? And what do we believe we need? What are our needs? And they formed this document. And this document is asking for prayer and for help from the Western Church. So this document is 2009, it's 15 years old, and I had never heard of it. Have you guys ever heard of this document, the Kairos Palestine document? I have never found anybody who knew about it. This was one of these documents that I found as I was researching about Palestine, trying to understand what was happening in Palestine. I found out about this document. As I read it, it's the most amazing document, full of prayer, and it's full of the church saying, this is what we need. This is what we're going through. This is what we need. And it gave some action points. It gave prayer points and it gave action points. And it seems like somewhere in here, there's something in this that we could do that would help the church or help Palestine. Not just the church, but Palestine. But we as Christians should be able to connect with the leadership of the church from Palestine and Israel in this document. But I shared it with another pastor friend of mine, and he read it and he said, he stumbled on it. He told me because it talks about Israel being an occupying force, and that made him struggle because that was something he'd never heard before. Apathy can make us hesitant to get me. I couldn't get past the word Palestine. My pastor, he was able to get past the word Palestine, but when he got in, he struggled past the word occupation and calling Israel the occupier. So there's a lot that we have to be willing to learn and to listen, because there are things that trigger our apathy, that trigger our silence and our turning away and our willful ignorance of what is going on there. And so all of that is a look at apathy.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss an episode show by clicking the subscribe button now. Don't forget to check out Lanny's book, Learning to Listen to Palestine. Now back to the show.
Now I want to look at something else, and that's called gaslighting. Now, most of us have probably heard this term gaslighting. It's almost a buzzword right now because people are understanding what gaslighting is. But let me tell you the history of gaslighting, because it's a weird term, gaslighting. It comes from a play. I think it was like in the 1930s. It was a British play. And what this husband did to his wife is he would turn the gas light, because it was back in the times when the lights were gas flames. He'd turn it down and dim the lights sometimes, and he would raise the lights other times. And she would complain that there's something happening with the lights, and he would tell her, no, that's not happening. It's all in your mind. And so he denied her reality. When she said something happened, he would deny her reality. And he did it in a way that slowly made her start to question her own mind. And eventually this drove her insane, so that he could steal her inheritance. So that's the play that this comes from. So in gaslighting, there's several things that we look for. We look for somebody who denies somebody else's reality. This is cruel. And so you shouldn't let somebody deny. If you say that you feel something and somebody says that you don't have a right to that feeling, that's gaslighting. If somebody says that you don't feel that way, that's gaslighting. If you say that something happened and somebody says, no, that didn't happen, it's gaslighting, denying your reality. And slowly somebody can make you question your own mind and your own sanity. That's gaslighting. And sometimes they'll go so far as to accuse you, tell you that you are crazy, tell you that there's something wrong with your mind. There's another gaslighting. And this happens to be related to narcissism. Narcissists often use gaslighting as one of their ways of manipulating people. It's cruel. So I'm going to share a story that happened just last week. So somebody asked me about the opposition that I've got with the book. And, for quite a while, I asked my pastors to read the book, and they didn't have time. And there were reasons why they didn't want to support the Christ at the checkpoint at our church. And there was a reason why they didn't want to bring in this movie about Palestine, even though we've brought in pro-Israel movies, we've brought in movies. There's a movie called Sheep Among Wolves. There's a number of movies that we've brought into the church. And so it seemed appropriate. It seemed, following the same pattern. But they said, no, it wasn't okay. So something in my mind, I was thinking that we were missing something. But it all became very, very clear when my pastor finally read my book. And when he read my book, his response to it was, he accused me of being emotionally and spiritually unsound. And he told me that I should not promote the book, but get therapy. So That is classic gaslighting. That happened. That was really interesting. So, if you've ever had somebody do this to you, you know that that's gaslighting. And this is actually fairly common. When you look at Israel and the way Israel treats Palestine, they're constantly being gaslighted. If they go through something, that they'll say, "Oh no, that didn't happen." They just deny it. So they're denying the reality of the what Palestinians are going through. And then a lot of us will follow. If a narcissist is leading, the narcissist is easy to believe, and it's easy to go ahead and follow what the narcissist is doing. The Israeli government that is ruling right now is just like the embodiment of narcissism in the way they treat Palestine. They deny the reality of what the Palestinians are going through. At the very beginning, when they started bombing Gaza, and we're seeing these dead children, they're saying, "Oh, those aren't really dead children. They're dolls." Well, that's gaslighting because those were dead children. They would say they're not, that when they bombed the Baptist church, they said, "Oh, no, we didn't bomb that Baptist church. The Hamas did it by accident." No, they bombed the Baptist church, and then they proceeded to bomb the Baptist hospital. Then they proceeded to bomb all the other hospitals, as well as all of the churches in Gaza. So that was gaslighting, when they're denying the reality to make people question whether they understand what's going on. And when they question whether they understand what's going on, then it opens it up for them to push and do more. And that we've seen this throughout the actions in Gaza. We've seen gaslighting of when somebody's questioning if something's bad. Oh no, you didn't see it that way. That's not really what happened. So it's a sad thing that's going on there. All right. So now that we know about gaslighting and we know about apathy, so how do we fight apathy and gaslighting? Well, if you are up against apathy, first of all, you have to start believing in yourself and believing that you can make a difference. And but then once you start believing in yourself, somebody is going to want to put you down, especially when it comes to Palestine. So you have to be ready for this kind of opposition. So if you come against, for instance, a narcissist who is trying to gaslight you, don't turn around and fight that. Instead, remember what you believe. Remember that we are taught to love our neighbors as ourselves. We are taught to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, and strength. If you're just going to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength, that means we have work to do, you guys. We have lots of work to do. And so that's what I'm doing. I am loving God with all of my heart, soul, and strength as I love his people who are being dehumanized in Palestine. And so to fight the apathy, you need action. To fight the gaslighting, you have to turn away and not let the gaslighting mess with your reality, to deny your reality that what is happening in Gaza is wrong. You all know that what is happening in Gaza is wrong. If you're hearing any other voices saying that what is happening in Gaza is somehow justifiable, you are being gaslit. That's all there is to it. Because you know it's wrong. Your neighbor knows it's wrong. We all know it's wrong. And either if somebody's not acting on that it's wrong, either it's because of apathy or being gaslit. Somehow, either you're turning away and not wanting to look at that mess, that's apathy, or you are not sure if you understand what's going on there. You know that genocide is wrong. You know that killing of innocent women and children and the innocent men as well, who are just trying to take care of their families there, you know that this is wrong. You know that the bombing of the churches is wrong. And the gaslighting, saying that there are tunnels under every church and tunnels under every hospital and tunnels under every school, you know that this is a lie. They haven't found any of these tunnels. They haven't shown us any of these tunnels. We know that this is a lie. That is denying the reality of what we are seeing. We know what is happening is that they are carpet bombing the place to drive people out. We know that this is ethnic cleansing and genocide. So, what should we do? First, we need to stop denying reality and don't let anybody else deny reality for you. Remember that you know your own mind, and your own mind is correct. So then what you need to do is just find places to have action. And it can be as simple as reading a book that says Palestine on the front of it. Here's one: The Israeli Palestine Conflict, Image and Reality of the Israeli Palestinian Conflict. This is a great book by Norman Finkelstein. It's a Jewish man who wants us to understand the reality of what is going on there. Here's another great book that you can read. This one is I'm a Palestinian Christian. This is a great story by Mitri Raheb, and he tells what it's like to be a Palestinian Christian. Great book. This is my favorite. This is The Land of Christ, A Palestinian Cry by Johanna Catanaccio. The theology in this book is one of the foundations of my book. So this book could be a great book for you to start with. This is meant to be an entry-level book for you to start learning to listen to Palestine just like me. It tells my story as how I learned to listen to Palestine. So get this book. It's a great start for learning to listen to Palestine. Here's another one, a great action book. This is a bigger read. This is a harder read. This is a commitment. But reading this book is loving the Palestinians. This is The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine by Ilan Pappy. So one thing you can do is just read a book that says Palestine on the front of it. I've got so many of them. Here's another one. I haven't read this one yet. Just got this one in the mail this week. So that's one action item that you can do. Read a book that has Palestine on the front of it. Get the Kairos document. There's another one you can do is get this and start praying for the Palestinian church and the Palestinians based on what the church is asking you to pray for in Israel and Palestine. Great, great document. Really important document for you to read. And this is available online. All you have to do is Google Kairos Palestine English, and you'll find the PDF of it. I'll put this in the show notes as well. The next thing you can do, once you've read something, share it. Share. This is a great one to share with everybody in the church, your pastors, your friends at church. Share this with everybody. This was a letter to the church from the church asking for help. We should all have read it. We should all know about this. It's been 15 years. It's time that we've all read it. This is a great action item for us to get over this apathy and stop the gaslighting. The next thing you can do, you can go to your congressman, to your representatives. You can go and talk to somebody and say, it's time for a ceasefire now. If you are in anywhere in California, and you want me to go with you, call me. I'll come with you. I'll hand them a book. I'll tell them my story. That would be a great thing. Another thing that you can do is organize an event. Organize an event that is helping people to become aware of the Palestinians and that we are called to love our neighbor as ourselves. We are called to be peacemakers. Don't be gaslit. This is what we are called to. These are Jesus' words. Don't be told, let somebody make you think that you need to sit down and be quiet. You don't. Your voice matters. What you have to say is important. So get out there. I've been to 3 protests in the last month. One of them was just a local one in my hometown. One of them was in Sacramento, and one of them was in Berkeley, the Berkeley area. And each time I went, there were a lot of people there. There were Jews, there were Muslims, there were Palestinians, there were atheists, there were all kinds of people there. But there wasn't the Christian message because the Christians are apathetic. and the Christians have been gaslit. But I was there, and I was like the only Christian voice. And the last time, I just to be sure, when I was in Sacramento, I went to some of the organizers and I showed them my book, and I handed out and gave away a few of my books, and I told them I'd really like to connect with other Christians who are protesting. And they said, "Yeah, there used to be some. Let's go see if we can find them." And so then I could connected to another organizer, and she said, "Oh yeah, yeah, huh, they're not here." So again, and the thing is we have a message. We have a message from Jesus to other Christians. We should have posters up that we're holding up that blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Even how Jesus said, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the land. And also the love your neighbor as yourself, love your enemies. So if you're not sure about who you're supposed to love, Jesus covers it all. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength. Go to a protest, make a poster. People that we are supposed to love the Palestinians. Call for a ceasefire now. That is love for the Palestinians. Have some action. Let's see. We had another action item. Oh, other things you can do. Share this podcast. Share this podcast with people. And if you know a Palestinian who has a great story, tell them to connect with me so that they can share their story on this podcast as well. If you don't know a Palestinian, there are so many Palestinians in our communities across the United States. Reach out. Connect with a Palestinian. Tell them that you want to hear their story. This is a way to overcome apathy. This is a way to stop the gaslighting. So I hope I've given you some great ideas to make the world a better place. We're not going to make the world a better place if we're stuck in our apathy. So break out of that today. And I've given you some great easy ways to start breaking out of it. But work yourself up for the more active things and don't do it alone. You can contact me. I'll help you. You can contact other people who are watching this podcast. We'll form a community and we'll help each other. That's another way of overcoming gaslighting is by finding your community, about finding each other and saying, we want a ceasefire now. We want to stop sending our bombs to Israel to kill innocent people. We need to deny the lies of their messaging of why they're doing it. So I hope I've given you some great ways of becoming active and overcoming apathy and overcoming gaslighting and becoming a person who brings love and healing to the world by following the teachings of Jesus. Love your neighbor as yourself, and blessed are the peacemakers, for they will inherit the kingdom of God. I'm not sure if I can fit in one more thing into this podcast, but I'm going to try. I went to Berkeley this last week to a little Baptist church. No, it was a Pentecostal church. It was so Pentecostal. It was awesome. And they had invited Munter Isaac to the church. I've got his book. I've got one of his books. He is a Palestinian pastor from Bethlehem. And he came and he taught. And I will put a link to this talk in the show notes. It was so amazing because he taught about the Good Samaritan, loving your neighbor, and overcoming apathy. All of these things that I just talked about, he spoke about these things so well. But what's exciting to me was afterwards, a woman came up to me and said, "I'm your people. We need to work together." And last week on the show, I put on a video of what modern Zionism looks like. And there were these Jewish settlers, these Israeli settlers, who were attacking Palestinians who were trying to go to their orchard to take care of their trees, to plant some trees. And they were attacking them. And there were American activists who were with them. They were with them to carry cameras and to just be an escort to keep these people from being hurt. And what happened is the American activists were attacked. And so we saw the one woman getting beaten on the arm, another one getting beat on the head with these clubs. The woman who was beaten on the arm, she was at this meeting in Berkeley. Isn't that amazing? So the week after I put this on my podcast, there she is, and she's showing me her bruises. So I'll show you a picture of that in the show notes. And next week she's going to be on the show, and she's going to tell us her story of how she overcame her apathy and became an activist to help the Palestinian people and what she learned there by doing it. You don't want to miss this show. It's going to be an amazing show of learning to listen to Palestine.
Thank you for tuning in to this enriching episode of Learning to Listen to Palestine. I hope today's stories and insights touched your heart and opened your mind. If you found value in our conversation, please subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with friends and family. Your support helps us reach more listeners and foster a global community committed to understanding and peace. Don't forget to explore our book, Learning to Listen to Palestine, for a deeper dive into these poignant narratives. And if you're inspired to take action, join a local group or start one at your library to engage with Palestinian stories firsthand. See our show notes for inspiration. We'll be back next week with more profound stories and thoughtful discussions. Until then, remember to listen, learn, and build bridges. Keep the conversation going and stay connected. Thank you for being part of this journey.